Hello, I'm Kristen and I have been a police wife for almost 10 years and I am so excited to bring you this series of videos about the biggest mistakes that I have made or arguments I have lost in my police marriage, and I hope that you are enjoying. I will link the playlist below with these 3 videos, and always feel free to comment and let me know if you have a question. I also have an Instagram. I will link it here. Definitely come follow me and join my police wife community there. We have such a supportive group of women on there that you guys can ask questions and I post them anonymously in the stories. So just love it. So check out my first video if you missed it, but you don't really have to watch these in order, so you can check it out after. And then next week I'll be posting the last one in this series. So what I want to talk about today is the second kind of argument that I lost that was okay. That was a good thing that I lost it. And today we are going to be talking about quality time with coworkers. So it's similar because last week what I talked about was also about time and like taking time away from the family to do something that would benefit my husband, and that was working out. But today I want to talk about how our police officers bond and hang out with each other outside of work. And sometimes in our marriage, when I have really needed Rick to be home, I have restricted him or made him feel guilty for that. And that sounds really awful, but I just want to be really transparent about that. I always wanted Rick to have good friends and spend time with his friends. But when our boys were babies and toddlers, Rick was working specialized units and he was gone like 60 plus, 80 hours a week for work. So on those moments when he could be with us, like I was just like desperate for him to be there and be with us for like, because of my loneliness and because I practically needed help, like those things. And in a marriage, like we have to prioritize each other. We have to help each other out. Like those kids were our kids, right? And so I would feel really anxious like when Rick wanted to go and hang out with his friends. I'll be totally honest about that. Because I already had so many days where I was alone, like with my babies. And I know he didn't really want to leave them either, but he was just trying to like sustain his friendships. And I've learned that it's more than just friendships. Like I've learned that Rick has a couple of really good friends that he's known since the academy. And the time that he spends with them isn't just quality time with a friend. It's also like time for them to kind of debrief. Like even though they haven't been partners in a long time, I think they have things that are in common and that they can get each other. Like actually just this morning, Maverick was asking me to go, oh my gosh, so random, to this Mexican restaurant down the road. And I have talked about this restaurant before. I joke about it on my Instagram because it's a Mexican restaurant. I love Mexican food, okay? And people have asked me like, what do I do when my kids ask questions about daddy's work, about their father's work? And we're just now starting to get into that because Maverick's 7 and he's starting to ask more questions that are like a little more detailed about this. So he asked me like, can we go to that restaurant? It's so funny because I'm like, yeah, I felt that way too. I told that to Rick once. I was like, let's go to this restaurant. And Rick was like, you know what? I'd rather us not go there. And I, the nosy person I am, I was like, what do you mean? Like, why can't we go there? Why don't you want to go there? And he said, because I think at night it looks like it's a place for people to go to meet women. And I was like, what? Like, okay, first of all, I don't get out much at night because I'm home with my boys. We're usually home in the evening at nighttime. I mean, we go out, but it's not that often and we're not out that late. So it would only be like him seeing maybe his drive home from work. It kind of is on the way. So he's passing it sometimes if he worked swing shift at 2 a.m. or something. And he's like, yeah, it's bustling at 2 a.m. And like that place just isn't that kind of place that it should be. Like it looks like a family restaurant and like he just sees things that we don't see, right? And I was trying to explain that to Maverick in like a way that doesn't scare him, and it's also super hard to understand. I told Maverick like over time, I've learned things about your father. I've learned to trust him more. And I'm going to share a story that I haven't shared on here for a while that I shared with Maverick today to kind of give an example of why I've started to trust him more and like what he sees, and how in my I have a book, a Police Wife devotional book. I will link it below. In that book, I share this story. And I also have an entire theme in my book of like how my officer sees things, because he literally sees things differently than I do, right? Like I see things like it's rainbow and sunshine in my world, and then he's over here like clouds, and he sees sometimes I feel like these negative things. Anyway, okay, so the story I shared with Maverick is that when we were first married, we had an apartment, and one day, just casually, I got a knock on the door, and this apartment complex worker, and he's like, I need to check something in your electrical unit or something like that, some kind of unit, and it was in our closet. And I was like, okay. So I let him in, he does his thing, and then he leaves. Like, it wasn't a big deal. I tell Rick about it casually later, like, hey, the guy checked something in here, and he's like, what? And he got all mad and was like, you let him in our closet? And I said, yeah. I mean, I don't know, some worker. And he's like, well, there's guns in there. And I was like, oh, well, first of all, I didn't even know that. Okay, that's a whole nother, that's a whole other video, but I didn't grow up with guns. They were like tucked. This is before kids. I want to clarify, we have a safe now. And we had just moved into that apartment, I think. So maybe we did get a safe after that in that apartment. But anyway, and I was like, I didn't even know they were in there. And like, so what kind of thing? Like, because if I saw one, I wouldn't be like, I would just see it, right? I wouldn't care, I guess. And he's like, well, he could come back for them. And I was like, well, that's kind of a negative way to look at this guy, right? Anyway, literally years later, okay, so I got defensive in that argument, and then literally years later, I asked Rick, like, oh, anything happened at work today? Like, how was your day? How are you after work? And he tells me, like, actually something cool did happen today. And he says, there was a person in an apartment complex pretending to be like a maintenance guy in the apartment complex, and he would get people to open their door on their own, and then he would rob them. And they called the police, and then it was this huge apartment complex, and Rick had to like track him down, and he even had to get a helicopter to go up above him to try to track this guy and see him. And Rick was so low, and he got him on foot, which is awesome, with the help of the helicopter, like seeing from above. Crazy story, amazing. I was like, you're a hero today, that's amazing. But the bigger part of the story and the purpose in telling you is that this is years later, and I am now seeing why Rick told me, like, hey, that maintenance guy might have not been a maintenance guy. He could come back for the guns. Like, he could be trying to rob us. Like, I was just clueless to that, but this, and I didn't know, like, oh, that really happens. It really literally happened many, many years later. So anyway, this morning I tell Maverick that story, like, not to scare him, but to tell him how his dad sees things differently than us because of the experiences that he has at work. And to try to help him to see, like, why sometimes about that restaurant, like, I just trust him. Like, I'm just like, okay, it doesn't look like a good restaurant. There's a million other ones. Let's go somewhere else. It's fine. So I share that with you in purpose of this broader video about me letting Rick spend more time with his coworkers outside of work, because those people get him. I don't get him. I still don't. I'm trying. It's been 10 years of marriage. I dated him many years before that. And I still, sometimes I just have to accept, smile and nod, and like hope that someday I understand him more on certain situations. But these people, his coworkers, if they're lucky enough to have people that they trust and care about and want to spend time with outside of work, they get him, and I'm sure he can relax a little bit more about that. I'm sure it helps him. It helps his mental health. It helps him feel less alone. Like, all of these things that I do for him, hopefully in other ways, but I've learned that. And sometimes they have like the best inside jokes that I don't totally get, but I'm like happy for him that he has that. And sure, there's gonna be moments where you as a wife, you need your husband home. And I was there, and there's going to be times when things are going to loosen up a little bit, and you can encourage him to have those bonds and friendships with their coworkers. And I think that's so important. I tell this story too because I've had other wives come to me and kind of complain about their husbands like being really social before and after work. Like, after work they have I remember Rick used to, as an example, when he worked night shifts, sometimes the whole unit, when they got off, they'd go to breakfast together. And like normally he would love to come home, and sometimes that would be a time period where we could see him before like my boys and I went to school and work, and Rick would be like, today we're gonna go out to breakfast. But that was like their bonding. That was a hard unit to work. I call that straight nights, like 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And that was their thing, that was their bonding. And like, I need to support that because that's what keeps him safe. They're bonded together at night. They've got each other's backs, that rapport building, like that's what keeps them safe. So that's why I wanted to share this story with you. And I shared some other things that I didn't even think I was going to share in this video, but I hope that this helps you to see why maybe your officer wants to spend time with other officers. I think that I'm totally comfortable with male officers, or like in a group, if there's a female officer there, if you are concerned about them spending time with female officers, I made a video on that a few videos ago, so just look back on my channel and I will link it below as well. That's a whole nother topic. So I hope that you enjoyed this video and you found it helpful, and I have one more in this series. So subscribe and stick around for the next one next week. Have a great week.